p.m. Eastern. Have a good show, my friend.
Connell, thank you. We'll see you tomorrow. Hello, good evening. Thanks for being with us tonight. I'm Blake Furman. This is The Hill on News Nation. Tonight, touring the devastation. The governor in the state of Texas saying more than 160 people are still missing from those floods. What President Trump is saying tonight as he says he will soon be headed to the Lone Star State. Plus, a marathon meeting today before his cabinet. The president calling BS on Putin. But there was one topic that he couldn't believe was brought up.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable.
How the Attorney General then responded next to the questions about that very topic. Also tonight, a New York moment. What the president said when asked how New Yorkers should vote to try to stop socialism in that city. The very latest in Trump versus Mamdani, and a warning for China, why the administration is now targeting Chinese-owned farmland all across the country and what they plan to do about it. But first tonight, here from the Hill country in Texas. 109 people now confirmed dead after the devastating flash floods, 161 still missing. The Texas Governor Greg Abbott touring some of the scenes moments ago as President Trump said he and the First Lady will travel to Texas on Friday.
I think a lot of lives have been saved. That could have been as bad as it was, and you could have lost double or triple. This thing was just really horrible.
We will not stop until every missing person is accounted for. Know this also. There very likely could be more added to that list.
Our Brian Enton live tonight in Kirk County, Texas, where the governor just held that press conference. We'll get to Brian in a moment, but we begin with our Xavier Walton live tonight in Hunt, Texas, with what he's seen there. Xavier?
Hey, Blake, yeah, so the Governor Greg Abbott just wrapped up that press conference. It lasted about an hour long, and that was following his aerial tour of the devastation. That was the first time he'd actually been able to get above the ground and see just the level of destruction. He flew right over our heads. He went down to Camp Mystic. That's only about 5 miles away from where we are. Some of the big takeaways really from that press conference, still the death toll, which we know, sadly, it will continue to rise. But the number of missing people here in Kirk County, 161. During that press conference, Blake, I looked around at everybody, and everybody was kind of shocked by that number, as we are now 5 days into the search and rescue and recovery mission. Now you certainly understand why search and rescue teams are still full force going in the area. I got a chance to ask the governor a question. Here it is.
We deliver the right solutions. One thing the speaker just said is worth emphasizing, and that is that for us to provide real solutions, we actually need to hear from the people who are the ones most affected.
So my question, Blake, to the governor was, what about these people who are frustrated and believe that your solutions are too little too late? And that was his answer. Interesting enough, he was talking about the people. There's a really powerful moment towards the end of the hour-long press conference between a local woman in a pink shirt who has been going through it the last 5 days, and she was really just airing out her frustration, not only with how the response has been, but also how they've been interacting as well. At the end of all of it, the governor did have a moment with her. They hugged it out. I'll tell you what, Blake, there's a lot of raw emotion here, and that's what was on full display at this press conference.
I can only imagine. Our Xavier Walton live tonight there in Texas. Xavier, thank you. The scenes across that state devastating. Since the flooding began, there have been more than 850 high water rescues. People found stranded in the middle of the flooding with no way out. Just like this drone footage that you see there. A person waving for help from his Suburban. Another person spotted holding a child up near a tree. Rescuers saving them. You can also see a basketball hoop that's halfway covered by water. For reference, a standard hoop, of course, 10 feet tall. People's homes and vehicles, though, completely destroyed as the floodwaters began to recede. Survivors still trying to comprehend what they experienced.
I can't believe the house is here. I called my husband, he works in Austin, and immediately said, it's gone. It's all gone. I watched the car go. the house is moving, I couldn't believe that it was still here, and we were able to get little things.
Our Brian Enton live in Kerr County tonight along the Guadalupe River, where rescue crews are still searching. Brian?
Yeah, they've been nonstop, Blake, and the fact that we now, I mean, Xavier hit on it, 161 people missing. We haven't heard that number before. They've been focused on the number of campers missing. It was 10 yesterday, 5 campers today. But to hear that 161 people overall just from this county are still unaccounted for. You can see this is a group of people who've been searching out here. They're taking a break. They've been working really hard. They just had divers in the water right over here because they got a hit on something. There was nothing in the end when they ended up searching this whole area. But if you look up the Guadalupe River right here, and there's now a helicopter going over me, you can see this is what it looks like up and down here. That's an RV that's up in the trees. There's so much debris. And there's human remains. I mean, that's what they're looking for at this point. And when you hear that there's 161 people missing, it explains why these search crews are trying to search every little square foot, because you never know where someone ended up. I mean, it could be 20, 30 miles downriver. We were talking to some of the search crews out here just a little while ago about how difficult it is, especially since so many of the missing are children. Take a listen.
When you're searching for people, you know, you could come across a deceased child, which is never easy for anybody. So that's why we've really tried to keep our volunteer base for this mission only special ops volunteers, what we call them. They're all combat veterans.
Yeah.
Very mentally tough.
Most people can't handle that. I couldn't handle that.
These guys can, you know, I mean, I'm not saying they're okay with it. I'm just saying that they can see it, they can do the job and move on and be okay.
You imagine how difficult it is, Blake, for these grown men who have, you know, done these searches all over the country and world. But again, when it involves children, and now to know that there's 161 people missing, it's really just been grueling work. Blake?
That number is unimaginable on so many levels, Brian, and what they're dealing with as you see it firsthand there in Texas tonight. Our Brian Enton in Kerr County. Brian, thank you. Well, as the governor provided updates on the search and recovery efforts, he faced questions about how this tragedy could have happened, and there was a moment in the basically hour-long press conference or so. The governor was asked point blank, who's to blame? Who's to blame? And this was part of his response.
Let me explain one thing about Texas, and that is Texas, every square inch of our state cares about football. You could be in Hunt, Texas, Huntsville, Texas, Houston, Texas, any size community, they care about football. High school, Friday night lights, college football, or pro. And know this, every football team makes mistakes. The losing teams are the ones that try to point out who's to blame. The championship teams are the ones that say, don't worry about it, man, we got this. We're going to make sure that we go score again, and we're going to win this game. The way winners talk is not to point fingers. They talk about solutions.
Joining me now is the Republican Congresswoman from the state of Texas, Beth Van Dyne. She represents part of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Congresswoman, thanks for being with us tonight here on the Hill. That comment from the governor stood out to me, as I'm sure it stood out to you and many across Texas.
Absolutely.
If you've lived there, I worked there for a year straight out of college, my first ever TV job. And when the governor started talking, I immediately started listening, because everybody knows sort of the analogy that he laid out there, right? But I also listened to the press conference in which there were questions about what legislation is needed, what are the right solutions here? And I wonder, from your perspective tonight, how you feel about having that conversation now, when's the right time, and what are the answers?
I think it's really easy when things happen that are out of people's control for people to start pointing the fingers and wanting to find blame, because you hate to think that things can happen like this that are caused over 100 deaths that just cannot be explained. But the fact is when you look at that river that had nearly 30 feet raised of water in less than 45 minutes, when you see the devastation that it's caused, I would ask anybody who's really starting to point fingers, get down there and look at it, see how quickly that evolved. And the fact is that in some ways, a lot of us are culpable. When we hear alarms go off, when we hear those sirens go off, we don't pay attention. We've heard them often enough that you just are willing to take the risk and you really don't think anything about it. those alarms are around for a reason. You know, what happened to these girls, what happened to these kids, this entire community is horrible. I mean, it was a horrible act of Mother Nature. But the fact is that instead of, you know, blaming people, and I love the fact that that some on the left think that President Trump has this much power that he can now control the weather. But the fact is that we can always do better, and we learn. There's opportunities for us to learn from loss about how we can make it better in the future. And look, I was a mayor. You know, when I was a mayor, I was required to take, you know, emergency protocol training.
Right.
You need to know what happens when these sirens go off, who you call, where the chains of command are, where the chains of need are, and what you do, and you follow those protocols. And sometimes we get lax, sometimes we don't always remember them. I think, you know, maybe looking at that and upgrading that, but, you know, to turn to the federal government and say, well, it's another bill we have to pass, as if that would have prevented this loss, is ridiculous. It's not helping.
What's needed tonight in your state as you see it?
Prayer, a lot of prayer and a lot of hope. And if you are, you know, if you are in a position to be able to send, you know, funds to some of these volunteer organizations that are doing so much, or just things that they need, you know, whether or not it's shampoo, flashlights, boots, blankets, those types of things. But really right now, we need everybody to come together and support the people who are the survivors, support the people who are right now trying to find more victims of this tragedy, you know, that are out there in the night. You just heard from your last reporter how horrific some of these scenes are that they're falling upon.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of guts to be able to do this, and you have got to have a lot of determination. So pray for those people, but also, you know, be uplifted by the fact that you've had so many heroes that have come out of this. You know, camp counselors, young kids in their own right. They were able to help a lot of these campers, these really young children, our first responders, and all that they have done. We've got a lot of work to do in the next coming weeks, months. But as the governor said, we're Texas, and we're going to do it.
Congresswoman Beth Van Dyne is in the middle of the state there in the Dallas area with us tonight here on the Hill. Thanks for being with us. We'll talk soon.
Thank you very much. You have a great week.
Of course. All right, still to come tonight here on the Hill. China, farmland, and national security. How the U.S. is putting one of its top adversaries on notice. Tonight, why the Trump administration is discussing the idea of clawing back land. Plus, no topic off limits. At the White House today, the one question, the president takes questions all the time, right? And you always get an answer for the most part. The one question that made him angry today. And out west, the Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass takes on Border Patrol. But why is Governor Gavin Newsom tonight in the Deep South? I thank you for being with us here on the Hill. I'm Blake Berman. Other side of the break is 4 minutes away. Stay with us. All right, welcome back here to the Hill on News Nation. The Trump administration cracking down on what it's calling a massive national security issue, potentially threatening America's food supply, one of the implications at least. The Agriculture Secretary, Brooke Rollins, announcing today a plan to ban China from purchasing farmland here in the United States. A little while later, she put the issue front and center on the president's plate today at the cabinet meeting.
Obviously, the Chinese owning of farmland in our country is a massive national security issue. The states have begun taking a leadership role to ban the purchasing of China farmland. Obviously, Congress needs to step up and catch up, and we're going to be working alongside of them as well.
This is that map you saw the secretary there holding up in the cabinet meeting. This is the map that she was referencing. It shows Chinese-owned farmland near 17 U.S. military bases, raising concerns that the Chinese government could be spying on our country without having to do much, really, from its own backyard. All told, the U.S. Department of Agriculture says that China owns some 265,000 acres of farmland, spanning across more than half of the states in this country. The president, however, suggested that, at least when it comes to the U.S. and China relationship, he's on good footing with Xi Jinping.
I do want to say that I think we have had a really good relationship with China lately, and we're getting along with them very well. They've been very fair on our trade deal. With all of that being said, and I understand what you're saying, but I think we're getting along with China very well.
Joining us now here on the Hill, the Democratic congressman from the state of Arizona, Greg Stanton, who is on the China Select Committee. Arizona, by the way, one of those states with Chinese-owned farmland. Congressman, always nice to see you, sir. Thanks for being with us. The issue of China, it's one of the rarities in this town, you know it, that actually brings Democrats and Republicans together. And with this announcement today, I wonder from your perch on the committee there, looking after China or over China, if you think the administration got this right.
Well, they just announced it today, so I'm going to be looking at the details of it, and hopefully it'll come before the China Select Committee, because the China Select Committee that I serve on is one of the most bipartisan committees in China. We need to make sure that the United States wins the economic competition with China. And we've been very strong on issues like export controls, making sure our leading industry advancements and scientific advancement don't end up inappropriately in Chinese hands. And we don't want Chinese nationals acting inappropriately near national security areas in the United States. And so we have a process, for example, CFIUS, which looks at foreign ownership of American businesses, whether it is against American interests. And I think if this comes before Congress, you'll see something like that. We don't want to engage in xenophobia. Every Chinese national is not suspect, and we shouldn't treat them as suspect. But we should have a process to determine if something is problematic. Yes, of course, the United States has a right to make sure that inappropriate activity is not happening near military bases.
There was the idea, or at least the concept, of clawing back some land. Here was the Ag Secretary Brooke Rollins earlier today. I want to get your reaction on the other side.
At the federal government level, working to do everything within our ability, including presidential authorities, to claw back what has already been purchased by China and other foreign adversaries.
I know you said, and you're right, that this obviously just came today from the Department of Agriculture, but the issue has been around, as you also know, for quite some time. What about this concept, Congressman, of clawing back land, and is that feasible?
Yes. The United States has every right, if someone has purchased land and we are to determine that they are a danger to the United States national interest, the United States government has every right to claw that back. There may be an issue about whether or not there has to be any kind of payment for that, but the ability of the government to acquire land from someone who is engaging in nefarious activities against the United States national interests, of course we should have that right.
I saw a headline today, Congressman. It blew my mind. In the state of Michigan, Singapore owns 5% of Michigan's Upper Peninsula. Its wealth fund bet on timber. I know we focus a lot on China and farmland, and rightfully so, but we're starting to learn more of this. Do we need to be looking at other nations just beyond China here?
Well, first off, Singapore is not an adversarial nation. In fact, Singapore has a very good working relationship,
right? Which is why I bring it up.
With the United States. Sure, we need to look at what's in the best interest of the United States of America, but we are an international economy, and we don't want to engage in policies which puts up walls so that the United States cannot actively trade and do business with countries around the world. Just as we want vigorous U.S. investment across the globe, it is often in the best interest of the United States to have foreign direct investment. In my community, we have the largest foreign direct investment in the entire country. The Taiwanese semiconductor company is investing $160 billion in semiconductor manufacturing. In fact, that's been much ballyhooed by the Trump administration. It's ballyhooed by both sides of the aisle because it's such a positive thing for the United States economy. So we got to balance this out. We want vigorous foreign investment if it creates jobs here in the United States. We want to make sure we create opportunities for American investors worldwide, and we don't want to create walls that wall off investment going both ways.
By the way, I would note on the issue of Chinese farmland, 265,000 acres, according to the Ag Department. That is a third of the state of Rhode Island and 6 times the size of Washington, D.C., just for a little context. Greg Stanton is on the China Select Committee with us tonight here on the Hill. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Of course. Still much more ahead tonight here on the Hill. This was fascinating. Over the course of basically 2 hours today, President Trump with his cabinet in the White House today, and this came before him.
we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep?
Jeffrey Epstein, the comment that had the president a little upset, and what he had to say as well about Vladimir Putin. We are live from the White House. Mick Mulvaney, Dan Cannon, and next as well when the Hill returns.
Today.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable.
President Trump blasting a reporter for asking about Jeffrey Epstein after the Department of Justice and FBI concluded that he did not have a client list. That was just one moment from a roughly 100-minute or so cabinet meeting throughout the afternoon over at the White House, the president alongside his team, and some choice words as well for Vladimir Putin. Our Kelly Meyer live tonight over at the White House with the very latest. Kelly.
Yeah, hey there, Blake. So President Trump stepped in when his attorney general was asked why there was a minute missing in that jailhouse footage released this week from the time of Jeffrey Epstein's death in 2019. As you saw there and played back, the president fired back at the reporter that asked about that, stepping in from the attorney general answering that question. It's all because really the White House has been on defense ever since they said and reached that conclusion that there was no client list, despite saying that it was on their desk and would be released months earlier. Here's more from what the attorney general had to say today.
I was asked a question about the client list, and my response was, it's sitting on my desk to be reviewed, meaning the file along with the JFK, MLK files as well. That's what I meant by that.
And the attorney general basically said that that missing minute was based on an outdated recording system that resets nightly. Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin, he's calling on the DOJ to release any Epstein files that reference President Trump. And another notable moment, Blake, in this meeting today, President Trump's really sharpest criticism yet of Russian President Vladimir Putin as he grows more and more frustrated over the ongoing war in Ukraine. It wasn't long ago that President Trump booted Ukraine's president out of the White House and said he was holding up a deal. But now President Trump says that Putin is the one dragging this out.
We get a lot of thrown at us by Putin for you want to know the truth. He's very nice all the time, but it turns out to be meaningless.
And tonight, former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev said that ignore President Trump's political seesaw. He says Russia won't respond, but instead continue pursuing their goals of what they call their special military operation, saying, quote, we'll take back our land, we'll work toward victory, he added. Blake.
Our Kelly Meyer live tonight on the North Lawn. Kelly, thank you. Joining me now to share their notes, Mick Mulvaney, former Trump White House Chief of Staff, NewsNation contributor, and Dan Cannon, former Battleground States Director for the Biden and Harris campaigns. Hello to you all.
Hello, Berman.
Thanks for being here. Hello, hello. I asked you both separately.
Yeah.
This was like 100 minutes or so, give or take.
Yep.
And I was like, what stood out to both of you? And you don't know, but I know this. You basically gave me the same answer.
Oh, come on now.
How about that? Roll it real quick. This was the clip.
We didn't move, no. It's always been August 1st. That's when we're paying. And a statement was put out today, and I put it out just to make it clear. It wasn't a change. It was August 1st.
It was the President, Mick, being asked about moving the tariff deadline, and that comment right there. Why did that stand out to you?
Because there's nothing to be gained by it and everything to be lost. Why he just doesn't tell the truth, which is, well, it was the 9th. But we're meeting with some folks. We've had some good conversations, but it's hard to do these things, so we know how we stand. Could have come out and said, well, these countries aren't doing anything, so we'll go on with them today. We'll do the other countries August 1st. People would have accepted that. That's probably a fair answer, and it's probably right. No one believes that August 1st was actually the deadline from the very beginning, and all it does is fuel sort of the conspiracy theorists on the left. The left is going to jump all over this. Again, I get that Trump likes to troll the left. I understand that. He's done it to tremendous political success. But he's not running for office anymore, so I don't understand why he just didn't say, we moved a date because it's hard to get these deals done.
And that caught your attention because?
Well, because I think I said he's spinning plates. I mean, he's got nothing here. And the idea of 90 deals in 90 days was never realistic. August 1 is not realistic. We were talking off stage that the markets basically did nothing today. It's like at this point, you don't trust anything he says on this stuff. And these trade deals, if you're trying to actually get a trade deal, it's complicated. You need a plan, you need a purpose. I noticed that Scott Bessent again talked about the revenue they're going to get. Is it about the revenue, or are we reshoring manufacturing, or are we protecting American workers? What is even the purpose of this enterprise? That's not clear. It's not clear where we are with the deals. He has not leveled with the American people or Congress on this, and he's stuck.
Both of you are down, let's say, on that comment, right? Yeah. Fair to say. What if I were to push back and say, you know what? He has, struck a couple frameworks with the UK and Vietnam and the US and China, and the markets have kind of shrugged this off. Actually, in fact, the S&P 500 is higher than Liberation Day and all that. I would suspect that that's some of what the White House would say, and give him time, let him do his thing. I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying that's the other side of it.
That's not, all of that is yes. My point is, Mr. President, this is what, why did you say August 1st was always the date? It hasn't been always the date. There's no reason to make stuff up. Yep. Now the left is going to say you're trying to pervert the truth. Is this going to be the new litmus test? In order to be a good Republican, are you going to have to be able to say, well, August 1st was always the plan? It's a meaningless sort of distraction from the substance. And he can do well on the substance. Yep. And here we are talking about something that was completely self-inflicted.
The other thing that, that caught my attention, and Kelly reported on it, quote, "We get a lot of bleep thrown at us by Putin. If you want to know the truth, he's very nice all the time, but it turns out to be meaningless."
A lot of psychopaths are. Nice all the time. I mean, I don't know why I'm surprised by that. Look, I think the
reason why I bring it up is because the last time that Trump swore publicly, it was after the Iran-Israel ceasefire. Yeah. And the reason why we talked about that, I'll get to you in a second, was because it's not, he doesn't do that publicly a lot, but now this is kind of a trend, Mick.
No, listen, we've talked about it on the show more than once. I think he's finally figured out that Putin is a bigger hurdle to peace here than Zelensky, and he doesn't know what to do with that.
Whether it's the trade deals or whether it was the Iranian situation or Gaza and Hamas and Israel and now Putin and Ukraine, he came in with a lot of bluster in terms of what he could accomplish this quickly. And I do think this is a man with outsized confidence in his own abilities to simply effectuate a deal by fiat. It's not that easy in the real world, and Netanyahu's proving to be a challenge. Putin's proving to be a challenge. This is all very predictable from my perspective, but he's running into the realities of these dictators who do not want to work with him.
If you could sit down, I know you don't want to advise Donald Trump, nor would you ever, but if you could sit down and talk to him and say, Mr. President, here's my advice going forward, what would you tell him?
Well, I don't want to advise him necessarily, but I will say I'm rooting for him in certain respects. I think on Ukraine and on Russia, actually getting back to the table in a way that puts weapons and support behind the Ukrainians so we could actually give them leverage to bring this to a conclusion is what we should be doing. On Gaza and the Hamas-Israeli situation, I do think he's got some leverage that he could use, which would be great if he did.
My advice would be simpler. Don't overpromise and underdeliver. It's the cardinal sin in politics. Granted, he's not running for office again, but a lot of people that are important to him are. A lot of people that could prevent him from getting impeached in the second term are running for re-election. And if the Republicans generally start overpromising and underdelivering, that's the kiss of death.
Let me leave you with this. Donald Trump answers everything under the sun, Mick, except if you were to ask him what's his cell phone number, he probably wouldn't answer that publicly, right?
Yeah.
And the reporter asked today about Jeffrey Epstein, and we've played that soundbite a couple times now. The right is not happy. The right is not settled with how this was all handled and, quote unquote, is ended at this point in time. What comes next here from your side of the aisle, with that being the answer from the president?
The answer about the August 1 deadline is the one that sort of stuck with me, but this is the one that I just don't get. Because why doesn't he just let Pam Bondi answer the question?
He did. But
why insert and say, look, I can't believe you, why are you doing this? This is crazy. Why are you still talking about Epstein? Because he's talked about Epstein for the last 4 years. Everybody has, especially on the far right. His son has talked about it. I don't know how you just expect this topic to go away in 24 hours.
And now, Blake, there's a cottage industry, we were talking about this offset, of people online who have made channels and a career and monetary interest in keeping this story alive in the conspiracy theories. They're not stopping. If you go look at right-wing Twitter, MAGA Twitter, that was all over this, they're wondering themselves, why is he doing
this? I did notice this on Raskin's thing. Raskin came out, Democrat congressman, says, we want to release all the files. pertaining to Donald Trump.
Right. I mean,
I'd love to see all the files, right? But it's interesting that a Democrat congressman just wants to see the stuff about the Republican.
All right, we'll leave it there. See you two on the other side of the break.
We'll
Thank
stick
you
around.
both. Yep, coming up, President Trump ignites some debate after suggesting a federal takeover, potentially, if involving a big story out of New York.
We're thinking about doing it, to be honest with you. We want a capital that's run flawlessly, and it wouldn't be hard for us to do it.
The genesis of that question was about Zohran Mamdani, what else the president had to say about him today. And on the other side of the country, a showdown between the Los Angeles mayor and Customs and Border Protection. And how about this question tonight, which we'll take up on the other side? Where is Gavin Newsom and why is he there? All right, welcome back here to the Hill on News Nation, the two biggest cities in the United States, separated by the entire country, each with big stories going on with their local governments. And President Trump would use a large portion of his 100-minute or so cabinet meeting to weigh in. The president specifically saying who New Yorkers, or when he was asked about this, who they should vote for in the city's upcoming mayoral race. He wasn't shy, though, about who they should not vote for.
And you shouldn't vote for him. He's a disaster. But, you know, I'm not getting involved.
That, of course, about Zohran Mamdani and what Republicans should do. Line good for a laugh there, but of course we all know the president better than that, as he would specifically address what his involvement could be in the city of New York.
If a communist gets elected to run New York, it can never be the same, but we have tremendous power at the White House to run places when we have to. But New York City will run properly. We're going to bring New York back. I love New York. You know, I loved New York for a long time. Then we had a bunch of crooked people in there. We're going to do something for New York. I can't tell you what yet, but we're going to make New York great again also.
President there hinting at possibly taking over cities like New York if he doesn't like the result there of the mayoral race in the Big Apple. Meanwhile, out west, the LA Mayor Karen Bass about to hold a press conference after a showdown with Border Protection, in which the mayor confronted heavily armed agents in a Los Angeles park. All of this going on in that area, and you know where the California governor, Gavin Newsom, is right now? In South Carolina. Presidential ambitions. Full panel here with me now. Once again with me, Mick Mulvaney, former Trump White House Chief of Staff. Yemisi Egbawali is a Democratic strategist. Dan Cannonen back with us from the other side of the break. And T.W. Origi is a former communications aide to Republican Senator Lindsey Graham. Hello to you all. Thanks for being here. I'm going to start with the right side of the table. If Mamdani wins, you want the President of the United States jumping in to run a city?
Well, I'm not sure he has as much latitude in New York as he would in a city like D.C. that's under federal sort of watch. But look, Mamdani is walking a perilous path here. First of all, I'm not so certain he will win if Cuomo drops out, if they can consolidate around Adams. I think Adams has a fighting chance. But these pie-in-the-sky plans that Mamdani is putting forward rely on not only federal funds, but also state funds, funds that he has no way of achieving. For example, free buses. He needs to raise taxes in his proposed raise taxes. Well, funny thing about that is he has no power to raise taxes. He's going to use certain federal grants to fund other programs.
But should Trump jump in at that point?
Well, I think, well, we've seen him dangle federal funding in front of other people all the time and threatening to cut funding to schools. So, yes, he's going to play games with him, but I think the people of New York are too smart to let him in the office.
You were shaking your head during that soundbite.
That's because the White House doesn't have any authority over the city of New York. They don't even have any authority over the city of Washington. Even if they passed a bill to rescind home rule in Washington, D.C., I'm pretty sure control devolves to Congress, not to the White House. But what Trump is really saying is, keep in mind, he's from New York. He's going to take this race very personally because he cares a lot about the city. And what he's really saying is, if that guy wins, I'm going to do everything I can to try and make his life miserable. That means withholding federal funds, doing whatever, taking him to court. But I do not envision, and I'm looking at Dan Cannon, please tell me I'm right about this, that he's going to invade the city of New York and instill himself as the mayor. I just don't see that happening.
I certainly hope that's not where he's headed, Mick, but I think we talked about this in the break again, but he has been provocative in his rhetoric, whether it's with L.A., whether it's with New York, whether it's with other countries and other governors, on both withholding federal funds or taking over in ways that he clearly cannot do under the law. However, I will say this, and I'm not being hyperbolic here. I don't think a takeover is imminent. But around him in the first term, guys like Mick Mulvaney and other serious people would tell him, hey, sir, I know you want to go here, but you can't go there this way. You got to go this way. This is the legal route to do what you're trying to do. Those folks don't exist around him in the same way. And I think the question for us all to watch is, does he cross the line that he simply should not cross? Does he actually direct ICE to do something they should not do with Karen Bass or with Mamdani or somebody else?
So speaking of... I think it's clear that I don't think he's done anything illegal with ICE yet. Do you agree with that? What's happening in California, at least there's been no court that's come in and said it's been illegal, correct?
I think it's an open question.
Okay.
So speaking of border protection, I saw Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles, go there in front of those Border Patrol agents who are simply doing their job. We know one of the lessons of the 2024 election was Democrats were wrong on the messaging with the border and immigration. Do you want that to be the image of Karen Bass and the Democratic Party right now?
I think Democrats want their leaders to do something, anything beyond send a tweet. Look, those people rolled into a park with armored vehicles. There were kids in that park. And my question is, what was the result of that? Who was arrested? What was the purpose and the messaging behind that? I think going into communities and neighborhoods and creating a culture of fear isn't helpful to the Trump administration. There are ways to go about conducting immigration reform, and this simply wasn't one of them.
Can I ask a quick question? Because you said something fascinating, which is Democrats want somebody to fight, right? Is that the main core, the body of the Democrat Party, or is it the sort of the activists? We have the same issue with Republicans. We wanted Republicans to fight against Obamacare and all that kind of stuff. Is it really the broadly based Democrat Party that wants people to fight against Trump, or is it just the activists who make a big deal on social media?
I do think it is the main core, but I think
if it's just the extremists, then you end up with a
it's a different
Tea Party on
definition
the
of
left.
what fight is, right? I think for like Democrats in just regular communities and not like in downtown LA, you don't want to see people arrested when they're dropping their kids off. You don't want to see people arrested when they're going to their court hearings. You want to see people who are following the law, who have jobs that are.
I'm gonna get to you in a second, but I want to, along that lines, tee up the fourth soundbite here. And speaking of California and the issue, roll it.
California, we're on the receiving end of most of the assault on Trump and Trumpism. After all, I live in the most diverse state, not just the largest state. Majority minority state. 27% of our state is foreign born.
He was in South Carolina today. You used to work for Lindsey Graham. You know that area well. You obviously, that's Mr. South Carolina here. But I'm going to start with you.
Yeah.
On Newsom in South Carolina today, what's the play there? I mean, this is obviously a 2028 springboard.
Yes, of course. I think, as you guys were just mentioning, I do think the energy in the Democratic Party is a very anti-ICE, anti-immigration enforcement message. My problem is this, and this is the bigger problem with the Democrats. I'll give them free advice. They always take something that has somewhat of broad approval. Like you mentioned, people don't like to see people who are innocent, who are here legally, be caught up in the ICE raids. Okay, fine. But what they've done is they've expanded that now to threats and active threats against ICE agents and the men and women of law enforcement doing their jobs to uphold the law that Joe Biden didn't uphold for 4 years.
I got to run, but give me 10 seconds of
My point is that everybody in that room is a Democrat. Those are not majority makers. Those are not swing voters. And it is the energy in the Democrat Party against Donald Trump just in those hardcore people, or is it broader? I think it's just hardcore.
South Carolina is a signal state. It's a great way to talk about ground game for America.
Okay. All right. I got to run. I'll leave it there. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Still to come. Of course. Other side of the break. Fascinating story involving Marco Rubio. I think this was one of the biggest stories of the day. Mick and TW are nodding yes. Elizabeth Vargas reports coming up in 6 minutes or 7 minutes away. She continues our News Nation coverage of the horrible scenes in Texas. That's 7 minutes away. My take, other side of the break. What happened to the Secretary of State and why you should be paying attention. All right, if you're just getting home, catching up on your day, here's what's trending right now on thehill.com. This was the big story here in this town today. The president bashes Putin BS, corrupt media, as he put it, in cabinet meeting. It was basically almost a 2-hour-long cabinet meeting today. In it, Pam Bondi was asked about the missing minute in the Jeffrey Epstein video. Lots of conversation about that. And then would you look at what's happening over in Paris, of all things, the main river there is closed for the first time in more than a century. That is what they are dealing with, some of what is trending on the Hill. To check out those stories and more, all you have to do is scan the QR code on your screen or visit thehill.com. All right, time for my take now, and there isn't a day that goes by at this point where I don't use artificial intelligence, yet alone think about the impacts. And it's pretty clear now that goes for the government as well. President Trump even talked about AI in the cabinet meeting today. It's why I bring up Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State and the State Department, waking up to this story today from the Washington Post. A Marco Rubio imposter is using AI voice to call high-level officials. The paper reports the imposter, who was unknown, contacted foreign ministers, a sitting governor, and a member of Congress. Now, here's the thing. This is not suddenly new. Reports earlier this year suggested that the feds were even investigating a potential AI-generated voice that was used to mimic the White House chief of staff. So, is a lesson here that a voice and that voice and text can be cloned, and a defense is a strong layered approach of authentication protocols, security identity practices, and vigilance? Maybe. At least that's what ChatGPT said when I asked for its take. I thank you so much for watching us tonight here on The Hill. I'm Blake Berman. We'll be back tomorrow, 6 o'clock Eastern. Elizabeth starts right now.